Greetings and solidarity in this difficult time for the world. DREFA, members of the executive and of course delegates, there is no more important focus for us than the future of work. We need a new social contract. We need a social contract that guarantees people full employment, decent work, social protection, and indeed the fundamental rights that make it possible for people to understand that there are commitments to minimum living wages, to collective bargaining, to social protection, to the things that will drive economies, make for decent and more equal living, and of course provide us with the basis of resilience for a sustainable economy. The global world of work is in disintegration. When you consider a global workforce of around 3 billion people, indeed 60% of them are now in informal work. That's not just in developing economies, it's in all of our economies, and particularly with the explosion of platform work and other unregulated models of business. We know that even before COVID-19, the convergence of inequality and indeed the climate emergency meant that we had to rebuild the employment model, rebuild a world of work that was based on rights, on social dialogue, on agreements between employers and workers and government, tripartitism, to build a just future. So last year, the ILO Centenary Declaration focused on these issues. First of all, it looked at the fact that only 40% were in the formal employment arena, and even then, contracts of employment were often short-term, or they were low wage, or there was discrimination. Women were indeed still not guaranteed equal pay or participation in the labour market at the levels that we want. And of course, hours of work had again exploded. So the employers, the governments and the unions negotiated a labour protection floor that all workers, irrespective of the employment contract, should have fundamental rights, including of course freedom of association and the right to bargain collectively. They should have occupational health and safety, and we're in a fight to see that included in fundamental rights at work. Indeed, they should have minimum wages that are adequate, that you can live on with dignity, and we should have maximum hours of work. There are many more issues for workers in Iceland, but if everybody in the world had that fundamental labour protection floor married with universal social protection, then we would have a labour market with rights and resilience that underpinned Goal 8, decent work, and indeed a central piece of the Sustainable Development Goals. But we want more than that, and in the declaration, of course, there was also a commitment to a transformative agenda for women. We need to make sure that women are part of a just recovery. And we want a just transition for climate and for technology, because even as we deal with the climate emergency, then indeed we know that technology has to be part of that story, both as we fight for the opportunities for technology, the skills that we need for the jobs associated with new technology, but equally the fight against the technologies that will simply destroy jobs, erode privacy, create an even greater model of surveillance in our economies than we have today. So we've transformed that into a demand for a new social contract, because the social contract broke down globally around the beginning of the 1980s. We will tell you absolutely that it did not include, even before then, the developing world to any great extent. But the hope was we could expand those fundamental rights, those guarantees of universal social protection, social dialogue, tripartitism into the developing world. But at the beginning of the 80s, hyper-globalization started a trend where labour protection, where the labour income share was like a roller coaster going down the wrong way. So we know that with the breakdown in the business model, the slump in wages, the erosion with austerity post the last crisis of social protection, then we need a new social contract, one that actually finances the recovery, commits to that labour protection floor and to fundamental rights more broadly, to universal social protection in order to build resilience. So what do we want in our new social contract? We want jobs, jobs and jobs, climate-friendly jobs. We want universal social protection, and the only way we will see that in developing economies is the fight the ITUC has led with all of your support for a global social protection fund for the poorest of countries, along with, in fact, debt relief, a restructuring of debt, and an end to the conditionality of austerity. The only conditionality should, in fact, be the SDGs, investment in the world's people. And of course, we want to see Goal 1, 1.3, social protection, Goal 8, Goal 5 in terms of equality, and indeed Goals 3 and 4, health and education, as a central part of all of that, within the framework of broader climate action and sustainability. We want to see an end to the surveillance economy, a breakup of the big technology companies. We want to see guarantees around privacy and indeed people having control over their own data. So there is much to do, but we will not do any of this if in fact our governments are failing people. And I want to congratulate the unions and the government of Iceland, because the commitment to broader accountability and transparency of government is everything. People have to trust in democracy, and that means trust in their government. The ITUC has released one of its frontline campaign documents this week, What Really Matters, we've called it. What really matters beyond GDP. And we list the indicators that in part I've just talked about, with jobs and living standards, with rights, with taxation and new taxation necessarily to finance the recovery. Indeed, to make sure that never again do we see our health and education, our care systems underinvested. And we need to see, of course, that in that context there's also a commitment to improving rights and to reporting on it, to taking climate action and reporting on it, and to engagement of people in terms of social dialogue, in terms of political engagement and consultation beyond the ballot box. There is an absolute commitment by the trade union movement to use the power of workers, to organise for a new social contract, to rebuild trust in democracy, and to climate and employment-proof our future. There is a lot I would really like to talk to you about, because Iceland always has a commitment to workers with an innovation lens about how you build and sustain economies. You are indeed very important to the trade union movement, to the ITUC, as one of the more equal nations on the planet. We have a lot to learn from you, and we need your ideas and your solidarity as we build that base of recovery and resilience, the new social contract in a sustainable world that we demand. Good luck. Thank you. I look forward to the outcomes of this, and indeed I really would love to be with you, and let's hope 2021 allows us to be together again. Solidarity.